Hello again. In this video I'm just going to show you a few things. It's not going to be another 2-hour one, so you aren't going to worry about that. In the other video I mentioned there was several different ways you could model things, and I've shown you one where it was just like getting boxes and cutting them and adding more detail and manipulating the shape. I also shown you that you can lay down a couple of points, well actually 3 or 4, as a quick example. Like that. We'll make sure they go in order and make the polygon. It's like that, which we can't actually see here because it's only single-sided and we was looking at the back of it. If a polygon is ever facing the wrong way, you can select it and press F to flip, then deselect it, and it will then be pointing the other way. Quite simple. Press delete to get rid of that. But there was a third way which I tried to show you, but I couldn't remember where the button to finish the job was. I've remembered where it is, so I'll show you. This technique is where you use curves, or splines as they're known as. Generally, or more frequently, it's used when people model cars, especially from blueprints. Like you see a lot of tutorials on YouTube, and it's how to model a car using blueprints, and you'll see the different views, and there'll be like a top-down view of the car, a side view, and a front view, or a rear view. And then people will lay curves down and then tell those curves to fill in a gap. Well, I remembered how that's done, so I'll briefly cover that, so you can see how that's done. You can go off and just test it. These videos aren't really so much about follow this exactly as I do it. It's more understand what I've done and why I've done it that way, and then you can use that same technique to do your own creations. It's like with that car, you didn't have to build it that exact shape. You could have stretched the dimensions to be whatever you want. As long as you understand the principles of what's happening, that's all that really matters. Anyway, this other method, there's 2 ways you can create the curves. You could either, again, just lay points down, so put one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. You can either, when you lay the points down, you can either do it by left clicking somewhere and it just puts the icon there, or if you press right click it will actually stamp a point down. So for example, here I'm just clicking left, here I'm clicking right. Undo, 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 undo. Right, okay, so we'll make sure we select the points in order, because you always want them to be in order. And then you go to, was it construct? Yes. Patch. For some reason. God, sorry, I'm stupid. You don't go to patch. You go to make curve. And you have make open curve or make closed curve. Think of that exactly the same as like a racetrack, because essentially a racetrack is just a spline. You either have an open track, which is like a point to point, or you have a closed track, which is a loop. Whether it's a wiggly loop or just an oval, it's still a loop. The start joins to the end. That's what these 2 are. Generally you'll use an open curve because that's what it creates. If I press undo, I'll show you a closed curve. Once it gets to the end point, it will automatically try and join round to the start. So it does that, which is not what we want. So we'll undo that and we'll do make open curve. Now that curve is essentially a polygon, and you can see the direction that the curve flows in. That's the start point and that's the end, I think. It should be, that's the way we made the curve. So if we do copy, move, paste, you can actually do copy, paste, then move, as long as it's selected. And then we move that curve to there. And drop the tool and change back to points, and to make sure that we have a proper spline cage to work with, we will use that point that point as the start and that point as the end, and we'll essentially just put a couple of points in here to make a curve run in this direction. So we will go there, there, and there, and then we'll do the same over here, and we'll go there. Oh, not there we go, that's in the same, there we go, there, there, and there. Right, now we shall move all those up. We shall deselect them, so then we're only going to affect that one, and move that to there. Okay, now what we're going to do is start from there, select them. Actually, no, I'm not. What I'm going to do is move them first. So if we look in this view, because it's going to be a little bit easier, actually in that view first, and I'll select all three and go back to that view and move those three up a little bit first, and then just the middle one, and then with these and then we shall move all three up a little bit, and then move the middle one up a little bit, and as you can see it's going to move in a little curve shape. So we make sure no points are selected and no polygons are selected, and then we'll start there and we'll select those, make curve open, and then we shall select those. Oh, that's not good. Okay, there we go, and make curve open. Now when we look, we can see we've got them two curves, and we have them two curves. So then, actually, yeah, select those two, and then those two. Now if we go to patches, you have, essentially it's how many polygons across by how many polygons down. I don't really understand the difference between lengths and knots. More often than not they seem to do exactly the same thing, so I'm not sure. I'll show you the difference between the two. There's not a lot of difference. So that's, we're going to do 10 polygons across by 10, actually 10 polygons seems quite a lot. We'll try 5. You watch, I've got the 2 dimensions the wrong way round. Click OK. Yes, we did. We got them the wrong way round. So that should be 5, that should be 10. Actually we'll make that 15, so it'll look a little bit nicer. And as you can see, if we deselect the curves, as you can see, It's followed the shape brilliantly. Looks crap because smoothing isn't turned on, so if you go to Surface Editor, and because we're just using the default material, turn smoothing on, and there you go. That's bloody brilliant. Now if we undo that, so we still got the curves, because actually, I'll redo, because that's the thing, once you make the patch, the curves are still there. So there's one of two ways you can select them. You could either select a couple of the polygons inside it, and do select all connected, and then invert, and that will give you the curves. Or if while you're in polygon select mode, because you always get more options in polygon select mode, you press W to call up the statistics, and you can see you've got 75 faces, which are the 75 individual polygons, and there's 4 curves. So if we click the plus for that, it selects the 4 curves. It also registers them as being polygons that have more than four points, which they do. So once you make a part, say for example that, you wanted to make another part next to it, you just need to make another curve here, one there, and one there, and you can reuse that curve, and it means you'll always get a nice flowing edge. Or if you wanted to create a seam, like if it was car body parts, what you'd actually do is make copy that and just move it a couple of millimeters in that direction, and then make your other curves, and it will leave you with a very slight gap in between this set of polygons and that set of polygons when you make it. Anyway, we'll delete the polygons, so all we've got is the curves, and that shows us that. Now they are curves, they're not set meshes. So for example, if you selected those polygons and you drag them down, it will still curve properly. And you have several different types of curves. You can either do a normal open or closed curve, you can sketch, which essentially if you do that and then let go, it'll plot polygons down. If you keep it straight, or as straight as you can, it won't use as many. Oh, that's really bad. But again, that point to that point to that point is quite a straight line, so it didn't need to put any other points in there. We'll undo that. Right, get rid of sketch. So that's sketch. You also have Bezier, which is like you could do a curve like that, and then you get the handle, and you can adjust it, and you can adjust it. So if need be, you can do that. Oh, and when you click again, it does another one. Okay, and that has 2 handles now. One to control the start, one to control the end of the first curve, one to create the start of the second one, and it works so on like that. But it's not very often I actually work with them. Anyway, so we've got that curve. I'll move that one. Actually no, I'll delete the whole bloody thing. There we go. So if I go, actually we'll use Bezier. So we go from there to there, and we'll do that. This probably isn't going to work because I think I might have, you should have to carry on. Yeah, right, okay. You will have to do it all in one sweep that way. So we'll do that one. Oh, blimey. Okay. So we'll adjust the handles. Screw it. We'll make it a slight. Right. That's me getting slightly angry. It's either that or punching the bloody TV. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. 1 point there. Put it into points mode, it's easier. Another point there, another point there, another point there. And another point there. Right. But I'll show you the importance of making sure you get the points in the right order when making things. If you accidentally move past that one, and then you realise, and you go back, you do make curve, that's what happens. Or if you're making a polygon and you accidentally miss that one out, and then you go back, you get a mashed up polygon, and the only way you could fix that is if you do that. So yeah, it's quite important that you get the point order correct when you're making curves and things. So one there, one there, one there, one there, and one there. Okay, that's actually a bit of a mental curve, so right, there we go, that'll work. So we'll make an open curve, go to polygon mode, copy paste, move, so put that there, and then we'll move it up there a little bit. One there and one there. Doesn't have to be exact. Really not that important. Okay, so we'll move them up a bit. And we'll go that one, make curve, that one, make curve. And then we'll select them and select them. How to make a really easy fender or a front wing, something like that. So we go patch, and there we go. And then if you was to start building up the side and round here for where the trunk would be, or better yet, deselect that one, move them. Oh, that's what I wanted. Copy, paste, move. You stretch just to take out a lot of the curve, and then I'll stretch it in the other direction to make it longer. I'm actually going to hide these polygons because it's easier to select the points on that one then. I'll just cut it and I'll paste it to the second layer, then go back to the first layer. Okay, so then we'll go back to creating points. We'll put one on back there, and we'll put one back there. With that one, put it there, and that one, put it back there. Okay, so we'll select them, make curve, select them, make Actually, remember I said about if you get a polygon and it's the wrong way, you can flip it. It also applies to curves because they're polygons. So I'll undo that one. I'll build it that way. Dolt. Okay. Make curve. Now if you see, the two sides are running in opposite directions, whereas those two are running in the same direction. So if you select that and just press F to flip, it will flip it the right way. So we'll select them two, then we'll select those two. Back to patch. We'll keep the same settings, it doesn't matter. Inverse selection. Actually, is that? Oh, that is looking a bit wobbly. Alright. I'll move that one up. Now, you notice the other curves are stretching. It's because that point is the start and the end of two different polygons, which means they're joined. Exactly the same as if you'd done merge points on an actual mesh. It works exactly the same way. And if you do select connected, it selects all of them. And if you do select inverted, it'll select the inverted of them. Actually, I've just noticed something. Those curves are looking a bit crap now. So I'll show you another clever little trick. If you go to detail, is it? Multiply? Yeah, subdivide. Add points. If you click somewhere on there, it'll add another point. We'll do it here. Yeah, it did add it. Which was that one. So if we... There we go. If we do the same on that one, add points, and we'll put it in about there. Deselect the polygon, select the point. There we go. Just take some of the sharpness out of that, although that is a really fucked up shape. Ah well, never mind. Right. Select those two, then those two. Back to construct and patch. And we'll make that part. Right, we'll get rid of them curves now. It's just cut. Then, if you show both layers at the same time, you can see you can start building up a mesh. And if you're following blueprints, as long as you've got them all set at the same size. So if you're looking at the back view here, and the car is 2 meters wide in this one, and on the top view you need to have the width of the car at 2 meters, and if that means that the car is 4 meters long in this view, in the side view it also needs to be 4 meters long. Also the height in this one and the height in that one need to be the same, and when you do that you can plot a couple of points in the side view, and then you can move them left or say you plot the shape of the wheel arch, you can make the curve, and then you can move the curve in one of the other views until it is actually sat above, like it's sat on where that curve is supposed to be. Actually what I'll do, because that looks quite sharp, I'll cut that and paste it. Now we know that the points are sharing the same place because we use the same curve. So if we then do merge points, there we go. because it's two separate parts, it looks a bit it always puts an edge in where the two parts join. But so you can make like a wheel arch and then start building up the side of the car. So it's quite a handy technique. It's good to know all three methods, because then it makes things a little bit easier. Like you can do the basic shape using primitives like boxes and things like that, and then you can cut away a few polygons. So for example, you could cut out those ones, and then you could select those edges and you could fill in that gap. So you can do things like that, because as that's a single polygon, you can use bevel and things like that. So you could do things like that. But as I explained in the other video, if you've got several polygons and you try beveling, it does that. So in that case, you have to use the smooth shift effect, which is what we've done on the front grille of that shitty little car. So that is basic spline modelling. It's literally just plot some points down to make a curve, or use one of the curve options to make a curve, make several of them to build up like the cage for your shape, and then you use in construct, you use patch. Auto patcher isn't as good, stay away from that. If you want everything to come out looking the same, then make sure you keep the same settings on. So for example, we made this wheel arch, it was 15 long and 5 wide. So if you make this one 15 long as well, it will line up all the points and all the polygons for you. If we set this to 10, some of these parts wouldn't be there, which means you'd get a point there on this part of the model, but you wouldn't have a point there on that part of the model. So it kind of messes up the geometry. So keeping the same sort of numbers for the parts is always a good idea. If this wing was a little bit longer, then you could up that number to say 17 or 18. If you estimated that this part was, if that's the width of a polygon, like that part there, and you thought that this wing was another 3 polygons wider, you could tell this one to be like 18, and then it should still keep everything to the same dimensions. Or if you made the hood of a car here, you'd make it 15 long, but you might make it 20 wide. Then when it comes to modelling the front bumper or the grille, you'd make that 20 wide as well. So it'd match the same. If it's the same length, use the same settings generally, because it means that the polygons will all flow nicely, which is good. Something which I did use but I didn't really explain is select loop. So for example, we wanted to select all those polygons. You could either do it that way by going over all of them, or if you select the first 3, do select loop, it knows that the whole thing's going that. That's the direction that it runs in. But the good thing is, because these are polygons that all flow in the same direction, it should work when we do that, and it does. But those were 2 separate parts, and we've just joined them together after. Now the really freaky thing is, I'm not actually sure if this will work, but we'll have a try. We'll select those 3 polygons and we'll try select loop. Yes, it does. It even selected the ones inside the bevel, because they are still part of the same loop essentially. And you can do things like oh yeah, if we do another 3 and do, no, that's not what you do. You just do loop and it'll select the next one, and then if you select them ones and do loop, oh no, that's messed up because it's also spotted 3 polygons from that one, and that one, so it thinks that's a loop as well, which it is, but that's not what we intended. But yeah, so using loop is quite handy. It means you can, as long as all the polygons flow in the same way, then it will select all of them nicely. It's especially good if you're modelling heads and things like that, and you need to get all the polygons around an eye socket or around the mouth. You think of like a full-on goatee. It starts at the bottom, it goes up around your mouth, under your nose, back down the other side of your mouth, and back down to your bottom of your chin. And if you're going to model, you would model it that way, so that would be essentially a stretched ring of polygons. It'd be more stretched here than here, but it would be stretched. And then the next row of polygons would follow the same shape, but it'd just be a bit bigger, and so on and so on. And around the eyes you'd do the same thing, and then you just fill in the gaps in between, using, like, plotting a few points and then creating a polygon to fill in a gap. But it just means if you have to adjust that whole thing, then you can just select a few in the loop and tell it to select the rest of the loop, and it'll go off and do it. Right, I'll show you how to do a bit of texturing. We'll make a real easy model to start with. We're going to make a Coke can. Does that look about right? Yeah, that'll do. Doesn't have to be exact. Right, we shall select those and give it a new surface by pressing Q, and we'll do side. We'll make it red, and we'll turn on smoothing. Then we'll press inverse selection, give it a new surface, and type chrome. That'll do. You just be for the silver top, and we'll make it a sort of light grey colour. Right. Now we'll just give it a quick bit of definition. I'll select that, I'll do bevel, I'll come out a tiny bit, bevel again, up a tiny bit, bevel again, in a bit, actually come in a little bit more than the other one, and then bevel down. And then for the underside, I'll bevel in a little bit, and then bevel in, and down. We're not going to worry about using sub patches, so it's not going to complain that we've got a polygon that's more than 4 points. All we really need is the shape. Right, the next thing we need, now that would pass for a Coke can from a long way away. You can see it's red. Actually, we'll give it a bit of surface. So the side, we'll give it some specularity, about 70%. So it's putting a highlight on it, and it is quite smooth. We'll give it 50. We won't worry about reflection or transparency or anything like that. And then for the chrome, we'll give it about 7. Yeah, a bit too much. About 50. Now, the metal on the top is actually kind of like a brushed aluminium, so it's quite rough. So that would scatter the light more than a shiny surface. So, fuck it, that'll do. We'll turn the specularity down a bit more. That'll do. So that just means there you can see as a highlight. So that's nice. Ish. Right. So now that's all well and good, but it'd look a lot better if when you zoomed in, you could actually see the Coke label. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put a Coke label on it. First we need to go to Google. Come on Google, do not fail me. There we go. Slow computer. Coke can label. Images. How big's that? 537, too small. 12, that'll do. Oh, actually no, that one will do even better. So click that. View image. Save image as. Don't go to my porn folder. Don't go to my porn folder. No, it didn't. Okay. The projects stuff images. Okay, we can close Google. Now all I've done was just save that to the images folder in the current content or project folder that we're working in, which is still the underlined stuff folder. Right, so we've got an image. Click on image editor. Sorry, window was on the other screen. Click load, and it automatically goes to our images folder, and we can see there's the label. Lightwave can handle what? Okay, that's a pile of crap. Let's go back. This is the hazards of doing live video. Okay. View image. Oh, that's why. You hadn't finished downloading. There we go. Holy shit, that's a 3 megabyte picture. Doesn't matter, we can still handle it. Right, so if we go to Surface Editor now, we call up side. Actually, I'm going to press A to zoom in on all things. There we go. Right, now to apply a texture or an image, no, it is a texture, because an image isn't a texture. An image is just an image. A texture could be anything. It could be a gradient, a pattern. So, yeah, texture. Click on the T button next to color. It comes up with this. You have the type of the way you want to use the texture. You can either do it with an image, a procedural texture, which is a mathematical equation. You have such as turbulence or ripples. Ripples is actually quite strange. It's an animated effect. If you put that on a surface and you animate, that ripple will actually ripple all the way across the surface. It's quite strange. But you have all sorts. You have fractal noise. It doesn't actually seem to do anything. Oh, yeah, there we go. It's a fractal. It works like a fractal. Marble. So you can affect different things. And if you notice, as I'm adjusting in this window, if you look just above it, where you can actually see the texture applied to a generic surface, as I wind it up and down, you can see it changing. But we don't want that, so we'll remove texture, go back and try again. We want an image map. The way we're going to apply it is normal. These essentially work exactly the same way as Photoshop layers do. You can say, I want it to affect the lightness or darkness. I want to remove this from the previous image. And you can actually build up layers here anyway. So you can do things like have the base layer will have the Coke can label image applied to that. Then you could have a layer which looks like TV static, and it's just black and white dots, and you could say use that as like a sparkle effect, and it affects the layer underneath, or it affects something. You can make it affect various different things, but for this case we're just doing an image map. You have different projection types. Planar is if it's just like a flat sheet, like the ground or a back wall or something like that. You just tell it what the label is, tell it what direction, what image to use, then you tell it what direction to apply it in. So if you change it to Z, it does that. If you change it to Y, it does that, because it's projecting from above. So that's one way, but generally you only use that for flat sheets. You have cylindrical, which is for using on cylinders. You have spherical, which is for a ball, or something like if this can was a capsule shape, so it got a curve on the top and bottom. You need to be able to have map it over the curve as well, and that's what spherical is for. Cubic, if you're making a box shape, that doesn't require a projection direction. Ooh, that sounded weird. You don't need to tell it which way it's mapped, because it's mapped from all 6 sides, and all you do is just give it the size. Like in this example we do, how tall is this? Nearly 5 meters. So if we set the Y to 5 meters, it'll make it the same length. But the problem is, this isn't a cube. It's a cylinder. You also have front projection mapping, which is, imagine the camera is a projector and it's just projecting an image. So say you was pointing it into the corner of a room. A projection image won't warp to the shape of the room. You'd see the image appear flat on the 2 walls and the floor in the corner. It's not like the image would bend it wouldn't stretch to fit in the corners. I forgot where I was going with that. Oh yeah, front projection. What it is very handy for is if you've got a photograph, like I posted that picture the other week of the Lotus Carlton stood on a road. That was just a photo, but the car was casting a shadow, so it needs something to be able to cast a shadow onto. So you have to put in a floor, but you have to make the floor look invisible, otherwise you'll see a floor in a picture and it doesn't look right. So what you do is you tell it to use front projection and to use the same image as you're using in the background, the photograph. And whichever, and it does, if you're using a background image, it will always appear in the background. It doesn't matter if you're pointing the camera forwards or if you rotate it 90 degrees, it'll always appear directly opposite the camera, because it's the background. It's always in the background. So you put a ground plane in, a flat sheet, and you tell it to project that background onto it. And as long as you get the camera angle right, so the ground plane appears to be sloping in the same direction as the image. So like if you're using a photograph of a road which runs diagonal from top left to bottom right, you have to angle your camera so the ground plane, the edge of it, is also running top left to bottom right. That means that your camera is in the same place as where the camera was in the photograph. Then you just stick a model somewhere in the view of the camera, and it will always appear as if you're taking it from the correct angle. So that's what front projection mapping is. You also have UV mapping, which is the most common method nowadays. It's what's used in all the games. It's what we use in Test Drive Unlimited. Essentially, if you unwrapped a model and lay it out flat, that's what a UV map is. So that's why the skins for the cars in Test Drive, you can see all the body panels, and it just looks like it's just been broken apart into its flat components and laid down on the floor. And that's exactly what it is. When you create a UV map, you essentially create it with all these options. So you can say, is it based on a cylinder, a cube, a flat sheet? Which direction is it coming from? So if you wanted to UV map the floor, you would say it would be planar, and it would be from the Y direction, which is up and down. If it was the back wall, you would say it's, or if it was a whole room, you could say it's cubic, and it'll unwrap the room and you can see all the sides, and then you can paint that up. So first of all, I'll show you how to texture without using UV mapping properly, and then I'll show you how to create UV maps for things and how to use that. It is really easy, don't worry. So as we know, this is a cylinder, and that is not the right size. So you could either manually set this, no, that's position, right, we'll zero that. We know that the height of the image is that, there we go, that's the better one. Right, so we want it in the Y direction because there is no edge this way round, either looking from that side or looking from the back. There's no edge, so there's no real start point, so you look at it from the top. If there's the top, if the can had tipped over so it was facing that way, you would make it in the Z direction. If the can had tipped over this way, so this wouldn't be the top, it would be the end in this view, you'd do it in the X direction. But for this it's the Y direction, so it's 5 meters. But we can see that the image is actually squashed. So if we adjust, no, that's not right. We'll turn on world coordinate. No, we don't want automatic sizing. I wonder why it's doing that. Actually, it might not be. It could just be an error. Which are them? Oh, it is just one polygon. It's that one. That's peculiar. But it may not actually be doing that. It may just be an effect of the viewport, and when you actually render it, it renders properly. You get all sorts of strange things like that. If you're doing hair, and you just make it, if you just do it by making some strips, rather than actually making individual hairs, because you need bloody millions. If you just make some strips of polygons, and you use a hair texture, some parts of it, you'll get like where the group of hairs come together at the tip. So you'd need a transparency map in there as well, so you only see the image where the hairs should be, and everything else is transparent. And I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Anyway, alright, so it will come back to me in a minute. I'll suddenly shout, "Ooh, that's what it was." I wish you was here talking to me, so you'd be able to remind me what I was going to say. Never mind. Right, so that is essentially how to map an image without using UV mapping. Now, there are good points and bad points. UV mapping means you have to go through the process of unwrapping the object and then making sure that the unwrapped object fits the image properly. Whereas if you just do it this way, using standard projection mapping, either cylindrical or planar or whichever, you can just set the size and it will try and map it as best as it can. But the problem is it has a position in space. So like if we set that to 0, you can see it's just moved. If we set that to 0, it's moved again, and it's moved again. And if we adjust that, so that's telling Lightwave or Modeler where that image is in 3D space. It's not actually tied directly to that mesh, which is a problem, because if it's an object that you intend to move, you can't use standard projection mapping. You have to use UV, because actually I don't need to have it selected to do it. See how the texture is moving? Or if I move it in that direction, the texture stays still. But of course, if I move that back to center, so that's at least sort of right, move it up to there, that's actually too much. Okay. But you can see the texture is repeated. If you set the size to only be 1 meter, the texture would repeat every 1 meter. If you set it to 10 meters, or if you set it to 17 meters, the texture will repeat every 17 meters. And if you set the, I'll call it up. So say for example we set that to a scale, not position. Set that to 5. It doesn't matter. You could set that to 3 meters and set that to 7 meters. And the texture will repeat every 5 meters there, it repeat every 7 meters in that direction, and it repeats every 3 meters in that direction. So that's quite handy, but it only really works on objects that stand still. It doesn't matter if you use the camera, if you move the camera rather, because the objects are still staying still. They're still in the same physical 3D part of space, which is the same place as where the texture is. So if you're using a wall, or if you're using an object that's not going to get moved, you can use this sort of method. But if the object moves in any way, then ideally you need UV mapping, because that does tie directly onto the mesh. So what I'll do, I'll remove that, so we have no mapping on it now, and I'll call up that. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. It seems next door are having a bit of a party, and a couple of the guys went outside into the back garden, and they was being rather noisy, so the dog done his job and he went out and basically warned them that he was there. He basically went ape shit. Sounded like a cannon going off. Anyway, where was we? Yes, UV mapping. Okay. It's usually easier to do it in the top view, just so it's out of the way. But switch to UV texture, and that box is what will contain the UV map. So we'll do it there. Now, as you've noticed, well, hopefully you noticed, it's square, which means your UV map will be created square. But if you remember the image, it's long but thin. It doesn't matter. That image will get squashed into this square. So if something is supposed to go the entire length of that label, the entire length of that image, as long as both of them start there and both of them end there, it's going to be the right length. Right, onto the actual UV mapping. Down here in the bottom you have several tabs and a drop down menu. The first one is for weight shading. So that was when I said you could like paint onto an object certain values. So you could say like where the skin wrinkles in an arm, part of it is able to wrinkle, part of it isn't. That's controlled by weight maps. Also, if you got a flat sheet of 1,000 polygons and you painted a terrain on there, essentially, if you where it's flat and at ground level rather, it's 0, and where it's at its highest point it's 100, and you paint all over that, and then you say stretch upwards, but use the weight map as the value of how much you stretch. Where the bits that were 100, when you stretch, they'll move further than the bits that are set at 10 or 20, and you can actually stretch a flat sheet to a shape of a terrain just by using an image, essentially, or a weight map. The next tab is textures. Then you have morphs. So you have weight maps, and you have the current one, or you have a new one. Texture maps, you have none, or you can create one, and when you do they'll appear in that list. Morph maps, you have the base layer, which is this object, and then if you create a new one if you create a new one, essentially what it would do was, this object looks like this, but if you wanted to change it slightly and then be able to switch between the two, what you do, you say create a new morph map, and you give it a name, and then you just alter this however you want it to look. Oh, one of my friends is playing a game on Steam. And then you've essentially got two different objects built into the same thing. The base is 0, and when you click on the object, that's 100% of what that morph is. In layout, you get a slider, so you can then set the value anywhere between that. So say for example you do a face. The base layer, or the base morph, the mouth's closed and the eyes are open, things like that. You create a morph called blink, and you transform the object so the eyelids are closed. You can then go into layout and you say at frame 0, that morph is 0%, so the eyes are fully open. At frame 10, the morph is 75%. so they're like 3/4 closed. Then at frame 20, it's 0%. And when you animate it, you haven't actually moved anything. All you've done is adjusted a slider, and you've created an animation of someone slowly closing his eyes, and well, actually quite quickly closing his eyes and then opening them back up again. So that's handy for morphs. It's particularly good for mouth shapes, and morphs is what are required to be able to do like lip syncing and things like that. The C tab, I have no idea what that is. Let's have a look. Oh, a vertex color map. You know, I've never used a vertex color map. I have no idea what it is. And then S is a point selection set. Oh, I think it's so you can make like groups, but you also have a thing in this called parts. So like how we've surfaced that as side and the other two bits as chrome, you can actually create two different parts, all still be welded together and things like that. And it means you can have all the parts on all one layer, but you can still select between the different groups. Or you can say, look, weight maps only affect this group, and things like that. So it all ties up together. But for this one we want texture. So what we will do, we'll say new texture map, and we will call this can. It's nice and easy. Right, again, as I said, you've got planar, which is a flat sheet. So if you was looking at it, and if we was going to do the can top and bottom, if you had a picture of like the ring pull and things like that, you would do it planar and in the Y direction, so it's looking directly down from above. What that would do is create that. Now that looks a bit strange because we're seeing the entire Y mesh from top, which is the same as that. There we go. But essentially, if you just got a square picture of a ring pull and manipulate the, now that's the thing, you can say select, we won't have the top polygon, but you could say select those or that one, select those polygons. Now this is only the UV map, this isn't the mesh we're altering. Move them ones there. So sorry, say for example you got oh, I know, on the tutorials page, I think it's for the get any, like how to hack any car tutorial, and I've got all the different car makers icons going in a circle. That was actually a flat strip. It was a long thin rectangle, and all I'd done, I loaded that into this, and while it was still a long thin rectangle, I mapped it onto I mapped the image onto it, and then I physically bent the flat strip round into a circle. And because say like I've got one car maker's badge there and another one there, when I bend it, they bend with the object. Unlike like I said, when you don't use UV map, if you move the object in physical space, the texture won't line up anymore. But a UV map is directly tied to the mesh. Once you've made the mesh, you can manipulate the UV map in any way. So say for example we'd got, I'll undo that, we've got the picture of the ring pull on the top, and it's circular, and when you look on the top of there, I'll move that out of the way, when you look on the top there, you can see the image of the ring pull perfectly fine. But if you moved that inwards, it now thinks that that part of the edge which is there is further in the image of the can. So like say the ring pull was directly at the top here, this was the whole top of the can, and you got the ring pull part of the image there. There it looks perfectly fine, the edge of the can matches the edge of the can, but here the edge of the can isn't there, so you wouldn't get the edge of the can projected on that part of the model. But it does mean you can manipulate things if you're creating a texture map from several pictures, the same way as you'd create a car skin. If you've already got the image and you need to make the car fit the image rather than the image fit the car, then you load the image in, you create and you manipulate the UV map to fit the image. So that's quite good. But we don't want the top-down view for this. I'll undo that. So we no longer have a UV map. We'll call it can. And this, as we know, as is a cylinder. So we'd actually want cylindrical map for this. But for the second, I'll tell you about these other ones. Spherical map is exactly the same as the other spherical map, except it's in UV form. It essentially does the same as the cylinder, but if it's got a top or a bottom to it as well, it'll map that. Atlas will flatten everything out and split it into parts. So what I'll show you is, I'll show you all of them actually. So we got cylindrical, create. Yay, that worked. Right. Now, if we just draw across them, that's the main side of the can. If we draw along there, that's the top of the can. And although you can't see it, that disc there is in there as well. It's going along that line as well. It's just that it's the same depth and we're looking at it from side on. So like that is actually two. If we click there, that's 2 polygons, but we could click that one so it doesn't matter. That's the inside bit of that can. So if we then put that in the background, that is just as a reference thing. In fact, we don't need that window anymore. We'll maximize that so we can see it properly. So we know that edge and that edge are the same size as the image, so it'll work. But this is supposed to be chrome and that's supposed to be chrome, which means that line, no, I'm talking waffle, that is the bottom of the can. That part is coming back up on the inside, so that's fine, we can still deal with that. But that is where the top of the can stops. So if we get those polygons and we move that up, that'll do, and deselect that. What that actually means is the whole of the can image, and we'll move them. Not like that, we won't. We can like that though. No, we can't. God, I'm stupid. Right, that won't actually let me select that. Alright, we'll cheat, we'll do points. Okay. Move that below. Now what will actually happen, like with standard texture mapping, where the image gets repeated, it is repeated here as well. It's like having the UV map there is exactly the same as having it there, but it's just moved to the next repeat. If you was to put it, say there, that's about halfway, that part is the same as that part because it's repeated, so it doesn't really matter. But for neatness, so like if you was doing a road, you only need a small section of tarmac with a couple of white lines on it down the middle, and you create a long strip of road. When you say create the UV map, it'll cram it all into there. The width will match there, but the length, like this, which is supposed to be long and thin, the width will match to there. So what you can then do, using stretch, because all the standard translation tools, move, stretch and rotate, they all work in the UV map as well, as long as you do it in the UV map window. But if you stretch that to, if you look in the bottom left, you can see it's telling me the scale. I stretch it to, it doesn't like going to 200 at this zoom level. If you zoom in a little bit, it'd make it okay. But what that would do is repeat the entire can texture twice, which in the situation of a road, that's exactly what you want. In fact, if you had 100 chunks of road, if one chunk of road was square and it was that size, and you had 100, and your road was 100 chunks long, if you stretch it by 100 times sideways, the texture would be exactly the right size. So it all maps. It all works out correctly and maps up properly. So we'll go back to the normal view. Now the reason you don't see it on there is because we haven't actually applied this UV map to the texture. All we've done is assigned, we've made the UV map. We still have to tell the surface to use that UV map. So we will go to the surface editor. Now remember, this is only we only want to affect the can, the side of the can. So if we go to color map, down to UV, we then get a new option there, is UV map. So we select can, and then select the image, and it fits. Actually, I think that was the button. I think I've stretched it a little bit too long. Doesn't matter. But the point is, it doesn't. Sorry, it's late. I'm stumbling. It fits that part of the can, which is what we wanted, and it maps around perfectly. There's the start and end of the label, and it's exactly the right length because it's exactly the right length in the UV map. Sorry, here's what I mean with altering the UV map. Like, we're stretching it, and so it affects that. But if we move the object, that's fine, because the image is directly tied on. And like, we can even do things like rotate it, and it'll still be perfectly fine, because it's directly tied to the UV map. But if we undo that, that's it, it's a proper size. So yeah, if we wanted to put this texture on the other parts as well, that's easy. Just call up that, call up UV map, can, and the label. But as I said, we're looking at it, we've unwrapped the can from the side, we've peeled it open. But that entire part there is that thin little line there. So that part isn't included. If we wanted to do that, we could map that as planar from above, and get a picture of the chrome. Or rather than that, and if you notice, we've got a colour white there, but it's not silver or white, because this is the colour channel that we're changing. We're applying a texture to the colour, so it overrides it. If we remove the texture, you can either do it by opening it up and clicking remove, or you can hold shift on the T button and left click and it will remove it. So we don't want that on there, but we can do something with it. If you go over to over to Windows and the presets panel, and we actually have quite a few preset materials. They are materials because they're not text, they're not just images. Like you have cell shading. You can actually make things look cartoony. Fabrics, there's leather, cowhide. In generic, you got various different things. You got a surface for perfect mirror, which is essential. I'll show you that. It doesn't matter. We can change it. It's 100% reflection and 0% diffuse. In the previous video, I think I mentioned about that. It's diffuse and reflection have to add up to 100%. So if you use 90% reflection, you'd have 10% diffuse. Because diffuse is how much light is reflected into your eyes, and reflection is how much of the environment is reflected into your eyes. And it's just the way light works that it always has to add up to 100%. So in this case, because it's a perfect mirror finish, everything that is in the environment will get reflected, so we don't need it to reflect light. But if it was a slightly different material, if it was car paint, you'd have diffuse on about 85, 90, and reflection on about 10%. Generally, you don't see more than about 10-15% for car paint. You have some odd light effects, which is a surface. You have glass. These have got different refraction amounts. So like glass inside, it's essentially flat glass. But glass outside is 1.6, which is the true refraction index of glass and water. So if you look at it, you can see the horizon, which is what that's simulating, gets bent. So they're quite handy. You have different metals. We've got iron, bumpy iron, hammered metal, bronze. Now remember I said in that little template project folder that I gave you, I left 2 images because there was 2 surfaces that required them. Those 2 surfaces are ray trace silver and ray trace gold. And what the image is that actual like highlight line. There's quite a few of them in there. Couldn't find. Oh, there we go. Those highlight lines. They are a reflection map, although they're not them, which is quite odd. I wonder where it is. It's environment, because you can say how things are reflected. So you can either say it's just what's in the backdrop image, what is actually in the environment, and what is in the backdrop image. You can map an image onto it, a spherical map, or you can have what's in the background and the spherical map. So for example, in spherical map you could use like if you got a panoramic image that's got mountains and sky and clouds and shit in it, or a panorama of a warehouse, you could say use that as the reflection map, but it's not directly tied to the car. So if you rotate the car 5 degrees, the image doesn't rotate as well. The image stays where it is, but it maps it like a ball. So ray tracing and spherical map is whatever physical things are in the environment get reflected, which means it does actually reflect something, but it also reflects an image, which is that image, and that looks quite a bold image to use, but it actually works out quite subtle, and it works quite well. But if you know, oh no, it's because they're using the using a reflection map as well. But generally, and oddly enough this doesn't, reflection and diffuse don't add up to 100. But I think it's because they're using spherical maps there, and they're also using a spherical based reflection there. But that, if you want perfect mirrored chrome, then just scroll down a bit and you have chrome. Actually, that defies the law as well. That's 75 and 30, which is 105. But it's close anyway. So you have perfect chrome. That doesn't have any rippling effect on it. It's just ray tracing and backdrop. So if you have a backdrop image, it will reflect stuff from there, which is what you want. But it also reflects stuff, other 3D objects that are in the environment. So that's a good one. But you get brushed chrome, which is similar, but the reflections are a little bit lower because it's a rough surface, and it has a bump map as well, which is a procedural texture which happens to be a mathematical equation. It's just, if you have a look, it's just been shrunk in one direction to make it seem like stripes, which is what brushed metal is. But if you want perfect chrome or a mirror, choose chrome. If you just want it to look like a nice shiny silver metal, then generally go for ray trace silver. So that's it. You've basically got a can. If you wanted, you could select just the top polygons and create a new UV map and do it from above, like I said, and then in surfaces, like with side, we called that can. You could call the other UV map top, if you wanted, and in there you select the UV map and you select the one called top, and then you can choose the second image, which would be the top of the can. So that's how you do that. And like I said, they don't have to be in the same direction. In fact, I'll show you. If you don't want those parts as in this UV map, if you select them and go to the map tab up here, you can say clear map. No, we didn't want that. Edit map, no. More. I always thought it was clear map. Poop. Okay, maybe not. Delete virtual. No. That's okay, we can cheat. So we had actually completely deleted. If you just select the side, then do new, can, we keep the same options because it's still cylindrical, it's still coming from the top, so we do that. Create. Go back to surface, can. Now that is the exact size. What you could then do is select the other parts, do new, call it the top. We want planar and create, and we've got the circular one. Now notice we're not seeing the other map as well because it is a different UV layout. So that shows you the different ones. So you can have both of them, and then in Surface Editor we'll do UV map, top, and silver reflection, just so you can see it. What that actually looks like is that. So I'll actually be able to show you properly here with what happens if you mess about with the can. Now the good thing, no it's not, fucking, okay, so we'll deselect them. Okay, now what I was on, I'll select a few more actually to make it just a bit easier, but not the side ones. What happens if you manipulate the texture? Because it's only that part that's getting stretched. And if I keep moving it up, there's the black line appearing again, because as it says, we've got to the repeat point. But oh, I think I've just knocked out the bloody texture again. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, that is essentially a can. Obviously don't UV map that image on the top, because that's not chrome, that's just the highlight map for the reflections. So if you want it to actually reflect properly using that, then you wouldn't use a texture map, you'd use the preset. But if you got a picture, a proper picture for the top of the can, then use that and you map it on. Okay, so yeah, I've shown you how to model using curves and splines, and I've shown you how to set up some textures and do UV maps. And also, texture maps don't always look brilliant in this. What you can do is, I think it's Windows, no, not in Windows, Edit, we'll start in general options. No, it's not general options, although that is where you can set your undo level, things like that. But what we want is display options. In GL, is it? Just double make sure. Yeah, this is the backdrop options. So like I said, if you got a blueprint, we change that to top. This is where you could choose what images go in which window, and set the size for it so they're all the correct size and things like that. But yeah, it's GL that you want. That one, I've got it set on quite high, but if you set it on 64 by 64, it shows you a low res version. You change the detail. Because when you're modelling it, if you're not actually physically modelling a lot of detail into it, if you're relying on textures, then it doesn't really matter in here, because it's just a preview. It's not what it's not the final render. It's like those sizes don't matter because the texture's not that big. That's just started getting blurry. There we go. So yeah, generally 1024 by 1024 is fine. But yeah, that just lets you alter the like how sharp textures are shown in this basic preview. So there you go. That's creating objects using splines and how to use textures a little bit more.